Hello, everyone. I'm with one of the teachers who's currently living in Florida at the moment. She's also one of the many teachers that has to use these kind of things, these Zoom calls to teach their students. And one of the such teacher is Miss Emily Hart, who's a science teacher. Hello, Emily.
Hi, William. How are you?
Okay, so let's get right down to it. So, was your first reaction to the pandemic itself?
So, last year, when we first heard news of the pandemic, the news started coming in really slow at first. We first heard about it occurring in China, then we heard about it spreading throughout Europe, and then finally, we got news that there were quite a few cases here in the United States. So in March of last year, we'd been hearing about it for about a month. And then finally, right after our spring break, actually, for our students, we got word that schools would not be reopening for some time. So when I first heard that we would be closing our school, I was really worried, actually. I think my first reaction actually was, oh, that makes me furious, because I was really concerned about my students. I was worried that without them attending school in person, that they would miss out on learning opportunities, they'd miss out on social opportunities. And I was also worried that they would miss out on a lot of the resources our schools offered them, like food and counseling and things like that. But most of all, I was worried about the pandemic spreading to our area and my students getting sick. So even though I was initially frustrated that we would not be going back into our school building for the rest of the school year, I realized that it was important to keep kids at home as much as possible to avoid spreading the illness before we really knew how to deal with it. So that was my first reaction, was feeling kind of fearful and a little bit upset. Yeah.
So what are some of so you told me that your schools had to be closed. So what are some of the big, huge adjustments that you had to make to your teaching job?
Yeah. So I teach middle school. Last year when the pandemic first hit, I was teaching 8th grade science. This year I'm teaching 7th and 8th grade science both. So it was a little bit strange when the pandemic first hit. The first thing we heard was, oh, schools will be closed for 3 weeks. And then we heard schools will be closed for a full month. And then we heard schools will be closed for the rest of the year. And then we heard, oh, schools aren't going to be opening on time. And so the length of time that we were staying at home just kept getting extended and extended. The first adjustment we had to make was to 100% virtual learning. So for the entire last quarter of the 2019-2020 school year, we were teaching all of our students online. And that was really tricky because nobody had really mastered Zoom at that point. We had some plans in place, but then our state government said, no, you need to do it a different way. So we had to come up with a different plan. And what I ended up having to do was just come up with one assignment my students could do each week and find a way to check in with all of them. And finding a way to get all of my students to check in with me was probably the trickiest part. We had a lot of students who I was really scared were going to fall through the cracks, who weren't showing up to online classes, who weren't getting their work done. And we just had no way of knowing if they were, even okay or not. And then this year, we started our school year a little bit later than usual so that we could really get a good plan in place. So by the time we started this school year, in late August of this year, we had a plan where about a quarter of our students would be coming into school face-to-face. And then the rest of them would be learning from home. We called those our Home Connect students. And so at the start of the school year, I was teaching 2 classes of students face-to-face, and the classes were very, very small, like no more than 10 kids in my classroom, which I didn't really mind. And I was teaching 3 Home Connect online classes. And that was really tricky. I had to learn how to use Zoom really quickly. I had to learn new tricks of helping students stay engaged while they were looking at me through a computer. And I had to convert all of my classroom assignments and materials to 100% online. So all of the assignments I would normally give my students on paper, or activities we would do like labs or craft activities, all of those had to be modified to be 100% online. As the year has gone on, it's been like we've had to make adjustments, it seems, every month or so. Every month there's something new we have to adjust to. So like I said, at the start of the year, I was teaching 2 face-to-face classes and 3 online. After a couple months, I got more students who were joining my class in person, face-to-face. And then it was down to 2 online classes and 3 face-to-face. Then it was down to 1 online class and 4 face-to-face. And now we're in the 3rd quarter of our school year. I have no more online classes. We've had so many students return to campus that I'm teaching 100% face-to-face. And that's part of adjustments. It is what it is. On the one hand, it is easier to teach students when they're in front of you. It's a lot easier to explain things. It's a lot easier to check in on the students and make sure they understand. It's a lot easier to keep track of who is participating and who isn't. But on the other hand, we have to try really, really hard to make sure everyone's staying safe. So that has been an incredible challenge. My students are between 12 and 14 years old, and 12 through 14-year-olds sometimes don't like following the rules. And it's a constant reminder every single day. I have to say it so many times. Make sure you're wearing your mask right. Make sure your mask is over your nose. Make sure you're not hugging each other. Make sure you're not sharing food or drinks with each other. Make sure you wipe off your desk with disinfectant before you sit down and before you leave. So it has definitely been a whole slew of adjustments. Every single part of my job has had to change in some way.
So how do you manage to cope during the first when the crisis happened, like this pandemic happened?
Yeah, so when it first hit, I actually was coping pretty well. Like I said before, it was difficult to adjust to teaching my students online, but I'm not gonna lie. For any teacher out there, I'm sure every single teacher out there will say, once you hit kind of March, April in the school year, you're really tired and your students are really tired and everybody really wants a break. And so actually I was a little bit grateful, I guess, to get to have a little bit more of a relaxed schedule. I didn't mind so much having to stay home because it gave me time to not only do my job, but, to just relax and take some time for myself. As the pandemic wore on, though, as we got, through the summer and, towards the beginning of the next school year, that's when sort of the stress started to hit of how are we going to prepare for this upcoming school year with all of these CDC restrictions and these new learning models. So all of the relaxation I did sort of in March and April of last year sort of out the window once the summer and closer to August hit, because then we had to start really buckling down and planning how we were going to prepare.
Okay, so you said during when you're the third and second question that those are some of the hardest things. So what is the kind of thing that sort of push you through to that breaking point that you break down and cried? Sorry that I asked that question.
No, that's okay. Some of the most stressful things early on this school year, when I was teaching my online classes, there were quite a few days, especially at the beginning of the year, where our school internet and our school technology just wasn't up to the challenge of,
Like it wasn't like up to date.
yeah, or, it wasn't able to deal with the amount of people who were using different online programs. And so, I would put in all of this effort to create a really good lesson for the day with really good online materials to try to keep my students engaged in learning. And then my virtual class would start, and half of my students would have trouble logging in, and the other half of my students would have trouble opening their assignment because their internet was too slow. And sometimes the activities I was trying to do online wouldn't load because our internet was slow, and sometimes Zoom would crash. And so having all of those technical difficulties that I was struggling to try to fix while simultaneously trying to teach a class, that was probably the most stressful part.
So now with the vaccines sort of like rolling out and all, and things are kind of slowly getting back to normal. So what are the one probably going to few things that you're going to do once this whole pandemic is behind us and all?
I'm going to visit my family in Hawaii. Yep. That's one of the things I'm really excited to do. The other thing that'll be nice will just, being able to not worry so much. Right now, anytime I go out to go to the grocery store or go to the gas station or anything like that, I always see, those few people who aren't wearing their masks, and it frustrates me so much. Or even when I go to work and I see my students who aren't wearing their masks right, or they're touching each other, those things make me really worried because I'm constantly afraid that they're gonna, spread COVID to me, or they're gonna give it to each other. And it'll be really nice to not worry about that so much,
Yeah,
and not spend
that's
so
probably
much
like,
mental energy on that.
because it's probably like the number one things that people wanted to do, like touch each other, like
Mhm.
not wearing masks and all. That's everyone's wants one of the first things we're gonna do.
Yes, I think the other thing that'll be nice is just being able to, go out and have dinner at a restaurant with my friends. That would be really nice, and I look forward to that a lot.
Yeah, so thank you for being part of this interview and all, and I hope that things will get back to normal too. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, William.